I don't know why exactly. Maybe it's just a calling deep down from my inner ghost, but I have this desire to watch through and review and commentate on the entirety of the Ghost in the Shell anime. It's something that's been on my mind for a while now, and it's a series that I've always wanted to get deeper into, and I'm only just now coming around to actually being able to do it. As of right now, my history of Ghost in the Shell pretty much is limited with this movie, the 1995 original film, and Standalone Complex. But there's more Ghost in the Shell out there to enjoy, and even with Standalone Complex, I watched it way back in the day when it was on Adult Swim. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so I am heavily due for a rewatch. As far as the 1995 original Ghost in the Shell movie goes, obviously it is extremely influential. Without it, we would not have things like The Matrix and other sci-fi media of the early 2000s. It is a landmark, not just for sci-fi as a genre, but also for anime in general. It is one of those prime examples that you direct people towards if they've never seen an anime before. Where do I start? Well, it's only an 80-minute movie, and it's got everything that you could possibly want. It's got adult themes and ideas, these questions, this kind of philosophy to the movie that I'm going to get into, along with just breathtaking animation in ways that I just miss this era of anime so much. I miss when anime looked like this. It basks you in the atmosphere of this world. There are action sequences, although I would not call this an action movie per se. There are decent amount of action sequences that are at play here, and all of them are executed so flawlessly in the animation. You feel the weight of the characters. You're able to capture all of the choreography. Nothing is really too exaggerated or slowed down or maybe too in your face. Everything is kind of done in a way of how it would look if it was filmed in live action. It just happens to be animated instead. And everything about it looks incredible. And I don't want to come at this video from the perspective of just talking about the animation and the shot setup and everything. I want to talk more about, I guess, how Ghost in the Shell makes me feel as I watch it, along with some of the ideas that it presents in the storyline. So a couple of things. One, this is going to be a full spoiler discussion. So if you have not seen Ghost in the Shell from 1995, the original anime film, you're going to get spoiled throughout this entire video because I'm going to be talking in specifics. As well as I have technically already reviewed the original Ghost in the Shell movie. I did a scripted out review that I edited that wasn't me just on camera talking. So I will link that review down in the description below if you want to check that out. It's from a few years ago. I'm pretty sure I'll reiterate some of the same things, but as I'm deciding to try to go through the entirety of the Ghost in the Shell anime, I figured, well, I gotta start at the beginning. You know, I can't just skip over the original film. I have to talk about it. Anyway, it's not surprising to me that Ghost in the Shell is critically acclaimed, that it's loved by many, many people, and it presents all of these ideas for discussion that we're capable of talking about, along with going on to inspire so many things that came after it. Even watching it now, and you can watch it in any version that you want to, you know, the original DVDs or VHSs that came out back in the day, or you can watch the new upgraded, you know, Blu-ray and 4K version, which I would recommend. It still hits no matter what and kind of puts you into this trance. When I first saw it, I was way too young to understand the story that was going on. I just enjoyed seeing the animation and, you know, the action sequences and the fact that the Major was naked for half the movie. But now as an adult, I can watch it with a little bit more of a critical lens. And every time I watch it, I get something more out of it, or I get more questions or ideas in my mind about what it's trying to say. But the essential premise of the movie, I guess, is that this is a sort of futuristic society where robotics and AI are heavily implemented everywhere. We are dealing with people that have augmentations. We are dealing with cybernetic organisms. We are dealing with the Major herself, which is, you know, the whole premise of Ghost in the Shell. Your ghost is sort of like your consciousness, your humanity, and the shell being the body that you carry that in. And she is this full cyborg, cybernetic creature that, I say creature, see what I mean? Like, this is how the movie makes you think. Cybernetic person, I suppose, that works for this organization called Section 9, which in the movie itself, Section 9 is not really explicitly defined. What you can tell is that they are working for some kind of public safety, fighting against threats of terrorism and threats to the general public, and pretty much through the process of hacking and using AI and using cybernetics in order to do that attack on people, and they're sort of there to counteract it. And there's all these different sections. We deal with Section 9, which the Major works for, and then we also deal with Section 6 that got their own kind of thing going on in this movie. So, but the movie starts off right away where she's on a mission and she's thinking to herself, a little bit distracted, but still goes through with it. We see a lot of the abilities and capabilities of these cybernetics and what she can do, how she's, extremely athletic, agile, strong, efficient, perfect marksman, and with this invisibility cloak that a lot of people use and is actually extremely useful. I would say this is one of the most useful depictions I've ever seen of invisibility in almost any piece of media that I've watched. Sometimes invisibility is used as a joke, it's used for horror with the original Invisible Man, but here it's used for this extreme practicality, and there are multiple instances of invisibility working extremely well. One is the Major herself using it for that assassination in the beginning, as well as when she faces one of the hackers later on in that iconic scene in the little pool of water, as well as Section 6, sneaking other people into the establishment. And I love the way that that's figured out, how the one character, his name escapes me, but he looks up how much they weighed as they went in, as well as how many seconds it took them to get through the door. So I love that sort of deduction of trying to figure out if somebody else is using invisibility as a way to infiltrate. It's wait a second, two people together wouldn't weigh nearly 1,000 pounds. And then he goes and checks out the delay on the camera of how long it took the automatic doors to close. That whole sequence of trying to figure out invisibility is just great. I love the way that it's used in the movie. But the major threat of the movie, and I guess the antagonist that sets the plot into motion, is called the Puppet Master. Somebody or something that is capable of hacking into somebody's mind, filling them with false memories or ideas or implanting things and being able to control and manipulate things from a distance. But it's to the point now where the technology is so sophisticated that he's not just doing it to robotics, but capable of doing it to human beings. One of the scariest things in this movie that even haunted me when I was a child is this idea that you could implant memories and feelings into somebody's body, right? Not just robotics, but if you could do that to a human, if it's possible to take away your sense of self, which you create by creating these memories and experiences that kind of build you into who you are. And I'll get more into that in a second, but this idea that you could take away what you know as your memories and implant something else to the point where you can't even trust your own mind. And it happens to this garbage man that is performing these hacks that the Puppet Master wants him to perform. And he's doing it, and he's saying oh, I'm having struggles with my wife. I had to move out. Got to see my daughter and all these things. And once he's captured, you realize that the man never had a wife and never had a daughter. And the scariest thing, the scariest moment, is when he's in this interrogation room and they're asking him, do you remember how you met your wife? Do you remember when you got married? And it's just, these are just questions that never came up to him. He just accepted it because those memories were implanted within him. And the moment that he tries to reflect and think, where did I meet my wife? He just starts having this mental breakdown because I don't remember. That maybe is part of the memory that was never implanted, and it's just not there. It's like imagine, you have a best friend or a wife or a best friend or whatever, and somebody asks you, how did you guys meet? And you're just like, I don't know. It's terrifying. And right after this scene is the big kind of philosophical scene where the Major is in the ocean or the lake or wherever she dives, and her and Bato are talking. And Bato's a badass too. I love Bato. First of all, character design. Bato's just this big hulking dude with this spiky white hair and the cybernetic eyes. He's just a badass all around. And he seems to be pretty nonchalant about things, but he really has an affection for Motoko, our main character, not in a romantic way, but just respect, appreciation, they're partners in what they do. And they're kind of in this together. They're these cybernetic beings that are, kind of in the same spot in life, even though they're so different personality wise. So I love the common respect they have back and forth with one another. I've always really dug that in their dynamic. And there's the whole sequence where they have this conversation about what it means to kind of be human, or maybe have a soul, or if a soul even exists. And these are kind of the questions that the movie brings up. And going back to the man that had the implanted memories, it makes you think, like, we come up with this conception of the soul, and whether or not, you're religious or not, it might have a different connotation. But essentially, what it comes down to, I feel like for most people, is that the soul is the thing that separates us from everything else. It's the thing that makes us human, right? But if you really boil it down, it's like, what are we as living creatures, right? It's like we have our biological drives, like I want to eat, I want to sleep, I want to have sex, I want to go to the bathroom, I want to, all just like the natural things. And then we have our memories and experiences that kind of create the individualism of who we are, right? So it's like we have like our natural biological things that we all want to do, and that's pretty much the same. I mean, there's variations, but like it's pretty much the same in most people. And then the thing that specifically defines us is that experience, right? But if that experience can be manipulated or implanted or given to you from something else, then it's like, well, then what does it mean to live? And also, if it can be taken away from a human being, but also be created by an AI, does that in some way make the AI, more viable as a living creature than it does a human? And it's just kind of these like strange ideas that the movie presents. But and it's kind of like similar to it's actually kind of like the reverse of Blade Runner, which, it's not like Ghost in the Shell is the first to bring up these ideas in media, right? Because Blade Runner has a similar concept, but in Blade Runner, the replicants aren't machines. They're just like bioengineered humans or whatever. But the whole conundrum in Blade Runner is that, like, well, are they really any less human, depending on how they are made? But in Ghost in the Shell, it really seems kind of like the reverse, where it's like, are humans pretty much just the same as machines if we are just living on this, electrical signals of biological drives and memory and experience that can be interchanged and taken out and replicated and manipulated. And it's like you're messing around with our data. It's like you're writing a different code. It's just the code is biological as opposed to the code being, something inside of a computer. So it's kind of like the opposite effect of Blade Runner. It's like, so what does that mean to be a human? And like, during that whole conversation, Bato is just basically kind of like writing it off. It's like, well, what do you want? Like, you're thinking, you're feeling, like, does that in itself just not prove your existence? Like, you're here, you're talking, you're capable of having these thoughts. That's good enough for me. And is that good enough, right? Is it good enough? I don't know, but it's interesting to think about. And, you wonder if all of these ideas we have, where does it really come from? Like, is your decision to do something, whatever it is in your life, is that coming from the collective experience that you've had? Or is that also just some kind of biological impulse? Is it just chemicals in our brain? Is it just our DNA? Are we, wired a particular way? And is it just incapable of breaking that wiring? Like where does it come from? And like, these are the questions that nobody can really answer. And, we have different answers depending on different religions or different philosophies or different ideas that people have come up with. But the fact that there is no definitive answer to those things is quite frightening, for many, many people. And it's just an interesting concept to ponder. Even more frightening, at least if you ask me, is the puppet master that reveals himself. That and there's like this whole elaborate backstory. I'm not even sure if I have it 100% right half the time. So it was like created by Section 6, and they didn't want people to know about it, but it was like a program that became sentient. And everyone was wondering if the hacker was a human. But really, it was just sort of this program that became sentient and ran to escape and put his consciousness into a machine body just to get away. And Section 9 captures that body. And there's this whole conversation when it comes to life. if it's any different than humanity. And you could break down its programming of ones and zeros the same way to a human if you just break down its DNA and attempt to explain it. And it's this kind of it's this entity that kind of wants to experience life, or kind of wants to prove, I guess, its existence. I might be getting some things wrong. I'm just kind of like going off of how I felt now just rewatching the movie. But essentially, the Puppet Master, the only thing that it can't do is die like a natural death and replicate. It can't spread its genetics per se, which would be the two things that would signify what life is, right? So it attempts to try to merge with Motoko and create a brand new being afterwards, which would be essentially the same thing as two people having sex and creating a child. And also in that moment, the Puppet Master himself would no longer be a thing. So it would be experiencing the two things that it is incapable of experiencing, which is having a child and also being able to die. And so, dude, this movie's so good, man. This movie's so wild. Meanwhile, by the way, all these ideas are cool to talk about, but in the meantime, you got Motoko fighting this giant four-legged RoboCop robot thing, and her arms are breaking off, and the heavy detail of don't let me in this rant and rambling make you think that this movie is only about talking about ideas of what it means to be human. No, there's also a lot of badass shit in this movie, but I've already talked about the badass shit, so I feel like I wanted to get a little bit deeper. But I'm just saying, when she fights the giant robot, it's really fucking cool. But the thing that always confused me about the movie when I was younger is I didn't really understand the ending. And I still don't think I really understand it fully, because I think they do get an attempt to merge. Because I always thought, when I was younger, I thought that the merger didn't work. Because the reason why he picks Motoko is because they both have this idea of questioning their existence. Essentially, they're both having the same existential crisis, right, at the same time. And the Puppet Master is aware of this. So they go through it, and all of these Section 9, people show up, and they start blasting away, and they destroy the Puppet Master body, and even Motoko's head gets blasted into pieces, and it's only Bato that is capable of saving her brain, which would be the only thing that would still be her. Her body can get destroyed, but if the brain inside does get destroyed, then there would be no Motoko, right? So that's kind of that's her ghost, right? So he's able to save her ghost. And he puts it into a new body that he could find, which was this little girl body, which was the only thing that existed. And, she comes alive, and she seems to be mostly the same. And this is why it always confused me when I was younger, because she seems to still just be Motoko. But then there's a line of dialogue where she says the merger did work, and now she's a brand new entity. And if everyone thinks that Motoko was destroyed along with the Puppet Master, and Bato's the only one that knows, and Bato respects and appreciates her, he's not going to tell on her, that she's alive, then she would be free from Section 9, which is the thing that they were talking about earlier in the movie, where it's well, this is what it's going to be forever. This is what we were created for, and, it's not like we can just retire. But it still confuses me to a degree, because it does feel like Motoko is still in control of the body. But at the same time, if the merger did work, then she would be a brand new entity upon the world, which would be sort of this next stage of what could happen with AI and cybernetics and augmentation, or whatever it is, because that would have been the thing that they couldn't do, is to replicate, to not copy themselves, to not just say I'm going to download my consciousness into a new body, but to create a new thing from merging two cybernetics together. And it seems like the end of the movie now, rewatching it now, I haven't watched it in a few years, rewatching it now, it seems like they achieved that. And so would that be the next stage of evolution, in a way? It's not dealing with humans, but what essentially is the difference? And I guess that is kind of similar to Blade Runner also, because if you watch Blade Runner 2049, spoiler, I guess, I don't know, but a replicant is capable, is found out to be capable of having a child. So that wipes any difference away from the two entities, other than just how you feel about it, which is, I guess, maybe the toughest thing to kind of handle when it comes to talking about AI and things of that nature. It's like, well, at some point, there's not going to be a difference anymore. So yeah, I love this movie. I've loved it for many different reasons over the years, and I always revisit it every couple of years, and I always love it every time I do. But it's the Ghost in the Shell property that I am the most familiar with, and what I really want to do is get into the stuff that I'm not so familiar with. So periodically, as I finish them, I don't have any set release dates for any of this stuff. It's just going to be as I get through it. So I don't know how long it'll take. But this is sort of my list right now, and I got this order from the internet, so correct me if I should watch them in a different order, but the way that most people say to watch Ghost in the Shell is to start with this movie, then watch the second movie that came out in 2004, then go to Standalone Complex Season 1, Season 2, along with the Standalone Complex movie to finish that out, and then there is the Arise timeline, which I guess has 4 movies, a series, and a final movie. At least that's what I understand. And then I guess maybe I'll end with the live action, perhaps. Anyways, guys, talk about Ghost in the Shell, 1995, the original. What do you think about it? You know, it's almost 30 years old at this point, which is crazy to think about. So what are your, what's your history with it? You know, when did you first see it? How do you feel about it? How do you feel about its ideas? What do you get out of it? And ultimately, how does the movie make you feel? You know, that's kind of the main thing about it. For me, I would say it really makes me question, you know, what are the things that truly make somebody human? And those are always, you know, the hardest things to kind of to think about. I feel like a lot of times, not Ghost in the Shell related, but just like in general, I feel like a lot of times I struggle to kind of figure my own self out. I'm like, who am I deep down? Like, what do I really want? What do I really desire? You know, what are my ideals? Like, what do I stand for? I think about these things all the time, and I wonder sometimes if there's anything that really separates me from any other living creature, you know, or if I'm just going based upon impulses and desires and, you know, just wanting to survive. Is there anything more than that? And if that is all there is that really a bad thing? I don't know. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it, and I will be, the next one will be the Ghost in the Shell 2, I guess, from 2004, which I've never seen. So that'll be next. Thanks for watching, guys. Give it a thumbs up, comment. I'll talk to you next time.